Welcome to a place where love is not just told, but felt deep within the soul. Here, silence turns into stories, where the long nights of loneliness unfold into whispers of longing, and where a single unexpected spark can awaken everything thought to be lost. This is where forgotten desire trembles awake, where a touch becomes fire and tenderness at once, and where devotion makes time and age vanish into irrelevance. Each story is told with raw truth, stripped of masks, carrying the beauty of passion and the weight of love that lingers long after the moment has passed. If you believe love still lives even after years of silence, if you've ever felt your soul stir from just one look, one touch, one breath, then you are home. Subscribe, stay close, and let every heartbeat remind you, true love never dies. The nights were the hardest. They stretched on endlessly, with silence that seemed to press against the skin, heavy and unforgiving. The walls knew too much, the floors carried the echoes of years gone by, and the air inside felt stale, as if life itself had stopped breathing within it. Each evening began the same way, a quiet meal at a small table, the soft hum of a clock marking every second, the way a body moved out of habit rather than desire. Nothing was missing in the practical sense. The roof stood firm, the house remained clean, the body carried on. But somewhere inside, a deeper hunger had been surrendered, tucked away as if it no longer mattered. There was a time when passion burned bright, when love felt like the pulse beneath the skin, undeniable and alive. But with every passing year, that fire dimmed, until it was easier to accept its absence than to mourn it. Loneliness became familiar, a companion that did not leave. The quiet of the house no longer startled. It simply became part of the rhythm of existence. It was as though life itself had whispered, "This is all that remains," and the heart, weary and resigned, made peace with emptiness. Yet the peace was not true peace, it was a compromise. A settling into silence because the alternative, reaching for something that seemed out of reach, felt like tearing open an old wound. There were moments when the mirror revealed a face lined with years, a body softened by time, and the thought arose that passion belonged only to the young. Desire, tenderness, intimacy, those belonged to another lifetime, one already lived and buried, and so the nights grew colder, not because of the air, but because of the absence of touch, of breath, of warmth beside the sheets. Every sound carried too much meaning. The creak of the floor reminded that no one else was coming. The closing of the door at night carried a finality that was difficult to describe. There were evenings when the weight of a blanket felt almost unbearable, because beneath it there was nothing but the stark reminder of what was missing. Even the smallest things, the way light faded from the windows, the distant laughter of neighbors, the way couples brushed past each other in the grocery store, all became sharp little reminders of a life that felt forever out of reach. It wasn't about needing company for the sake of filling space. It was about longing for connection so deep it could be felt in the marrow, a connection that could stir even the parts of the soul that had gone quiet. But that longing was locked away, hidden beneath layers of practicality, duty, and the lies told to oneself, lies like, "This is enough," or "That time has passed." Those lies were easier to carry than the truth, which was that emptiness had become unbearable. Even so, the heart kept beating. Quietly, stubbornly, it refused to stop longing altogether. In the silence of loneliness, the smallest things became magnified. The memory of a hand once held, the sensation of lips brushing against skin, the sound of a voice that spoke not just to ears but to the soul. Those memories would sneak in late at night, uninvited, and for a moment the body would remember what it felt like to be wanted, to be desired, to be loved in the kind of way that went beyond words. There were times when the silence grew so thick it almost hummed. Lying awake, staring into darkness, it felt as though the emptiness itself was alive, filling every corner of the room, pressing down on the chest until breathing became an effort. In those moments, the body ached not just for touch, but for meaning. The kind of meaning that comes only from being truly seen, deeply felt, and held without question. The kind of meaning that transforms loneliness into intimacy, silence into whispered confessions, and time into something worth cherishing again. The cruelest part of loneliness is not just the absence of another. It is the way it convinces the soul that it is no longer worthy of being chosen, no longer worthy of being touched with tenderness, no longer worthy of being loved with fire. That lie creeps in quietly, disguised as acceptance, and it digs its roots deep. It makes the silence feel permanent, as though nothing could ever awaken what has been buried. And yet, even in that silence, something inside refused to die. A fragile ember, hidden beneath the ashes, continued to glow, unseen but alive. It whispered in quiet moments, in the stillness of night, in the smallest flicker of memory. What if it isn't over? That ember carried a hope that could not be erased, no matter how many years passed. A hope that one day, perhaps unexpectedly, the silence would be broken not with noise, but with the sound of another heartbeat close by. For all the years of emptiness, there was still a truth waiting to be lived. The truth that love, no matter how late it arrives, has the power to awaken what loneliness tries to bury. And in that awakening, even silence can give way to music again. It happened without warning, in the smallest of gestures. There was nothing grand about it, nothing that could have prepared the heart for the way it would shift. It was just the brush of a hand, the warmth of a gaze that lingered a little longer than it should have, and yet it cracked something open that had been closed for so long. Years of walls, carefully built from silence and self-preservation, began to crumble in a single moment. The touch wasn't even deliberate, or maybe it was, but it felt accidental enough to pass unnoticed by anyone else. But inside, it landed like fire. The skin tingled, the heart stuttered, and a rush of something long forgotten coursed through the body like it had been waiting for that spark all along. It was as if the soul, numb for so many years, suddenly remembered what it was to be alive. There had been no expectation of anything. Life had been quiet, routine, predictable. Days passed without surprises, nights folded into silence, and the thought of something new, something electric, had been banished to another lifetime. But then his eyes met mine, and they didn't look away. They lingered, warm and unhurried, as though they were searching past the surface and into places I had stopped believing anyone could see. That gaze unsettled me, not in fear, but in recognition. Recognition that I was being seen, truly seen, in a way that stripped away all the years of hiding. It's strange how quickly everything can change. One moment, everything feels settled, almost dead. The next, every nerve is awake, every breath carries weight, and the air itself feels charged. His nearness was enough to stir what had been buried under years of quiet resignation. He leaned a little closer, just close enough that his presence seemed to wrap around me. The air between us thickened, heavy, alive with an energy that words could not capture. That small spark ignited a flood of memories, the way it used to feel to be touched with intention, the way the body could respond to the gentlest of caresses, the way the soul could tremble with anticipation. It all came rushing back, not as ghosts, but as living, breathing truths waiting to be felt again. What seemed impossible, the idea of longing, of passion, of being wanted, suddenly wasn't impossible at all. It was there, in his eyes, in the warmth of his hand, in the unspoken invitation of his closeness. It wasn't only about desire. It was deeper, more dangerous than that. It was the way he looked past the lines on my face, past the years etched into my body, and saw something worth reaching for. That look alone stripped away layers of doubt and replaced them with something raw, something terrifyingly hopeful. For so long, I had walked through days believing no one would ever look at me like that again, and in one instant that belief shattered. The walls I had built weren't small things. They were thick, fortified by years of silence, by disappointments, by the safety of telling myself it was better not to hope. Yet with one brush of his hand, 1,000 cracks appeared. The fortress shook. My own body betrayed me, leaning ever so slightly toward the warmth, aching for more without permission. It wasn't just a physical reaction. It was as if the soul itself reached out, desperate for the touch it had been starved of. Every moment after that seemed different. His words carried a weight they hadn't before. His laughter filled spaces that had felt empty for so long. Even the way he stood, the way he breathed, became a presence that drew me in, magnetizing me against every instinct to remain guarded. I told myself it was nothing, that it was a passing feeling, that I was imagining the way his eyes softened when they met mine. But deep inside, something had already shifted. The most startling thing was not just how alive I suddenly felt, but how deeply I realized I had been asleep. For years, I had walked through life as though it was enough to survive, enough to keep going without expecting more. And then one moment shattered that illusion. With him, even silence was no longer empty. It was thick with meaning, heavy with unspoken words, alive with possibility. It scared me how quickly hope returned. It scared me even more how much I wanted it to stay. Every time his hand brushed against mine again, every time his eyes lingered, every time he leaned just a little too close, it was like being reminded that the fire inside hadn't died after all. It had been waiting, patient and hidden, for someone brave enough to awaken it. There was no denying it anymore. What had seemed lost forever had come rushing back in the simplest of moments. His touch, his warmth, his closeness, they broke through years of silence and emptiness, stirring a desire that reached deeper than the body, straight into the heart. What once felt impossible was alive again, burning, undeniable, waiting to be embraced. And with that spark, everything changed. His touch was unlike anything I had known in years. It wasn't rushed or careless, nor was it heavy with expectation. It was a strange mixture of fire and tenderness, as though he understood that the body needed to burn and the soul needed to be soothed at the very same time. The moment his hand brushed against me, the skin shivered, but it was more than that. Something inside trembled awake, something I had thought long gone. For so long, I had lived in silence. Silence of the body, silence of the heart, silence of the nights that dragged on with nothing but emptiness. I had learned to quiet the hunger inside, to tell myself it was easier not to remember what it felt like to be touched, to be desired, to be wanted with intensity and love. That silence had become a second skin, and I had worn it as though it were armor. But the moment he touched me, all of that dissolved in a single breath. It started simply, his fingers grazing my arm, a gesture so ordinary it should have meant nothing. But my body betrayed me, leaning into it, welcoming it, as though it had been waiting for years. The air between us thickened, my breath caught, and for the first time in so long I felt alive in a way that made my entire being ache. The hunger I had buried roared back, not politely, not gently, but with the wild urgency of something starved too long. His eyes matched his touch, warm yet burning, patient yet urgent. When he looked at me, it wasn't just the surface he saw. It was the hidden parts, the places I had locked away, the desires I had denied. In that gaze, I felt both exposed and safe, vulnerable yet cherished. It was terrifying and beautiful, the kind of feeling that makes every defense crumble. I didn't want to resist, because his presence made resistance seem meaningless. When his hand finally lingered longer, pressing softly against my back, it was as though time itself stilled. Every nerve lit up, and every corner of me remembered what it was to be wanted. My body quivered under his touch, but deeper than that, my soul quivered awake. The years of silence, the walls, the lies I had told myself about passion being over all of it, melted away like it had never existed. All that remained was the truth that I was still capable of desire, still capable of love, still capable of feeling everything I thought had been lost to time. The hunger wasn't just physical. It was a craving for closeness, for the kind of intimacy that makes the world vanish, where nothing exists but two people breathing the same air, sharing the same fire. Every brush of his hand fed that hunger. Every whispered breath against my skin stoked it higher. What had been dormant awoke in full force, not shy or hesitant, but demanding, raw, unrelenting. I felt myself being pulled into him, not just by the magnetism of his body, but by the way his tenderness wrapped around the fire. He knew when to ignite and when to soothe, when to press closer and when to let the silence speak. It was that balance, passion and gentleness, fire and softness that broke me open completely. My body had longed for touch, but my soul had longed for this, to be both consumed and cherished in the same moment. Every kiss was a spark that became flame, every caress a reminder that I had not been forgotten by desire. The years of loneliness had convinced me otherwise, but here, in his arms, the truth blazed too brightly to deny. The way he touched me was not hurried, not careless, but with a reverence that made every inch of me feel alive. It wasn't just skin against skin, it was soul against soul, fire meeting fire, tenderness wrapping it all together until I felt as though I might shatter from the intensity. The body remembered quickly. The way it arched into his touch, the way it melted into his embrace, the way it begged without words for more. But what startled me most was how quickly the heart remembered too. I had taught myself to forget what it felt like to be held with both passion and care. And now, every moment with him reminded me that forgetting had only been a lie. Love had not left me. Desire had not abandoned me. They had only been waiting for someone who could awaken them in a way that was both fierce and tender. When his lips finally traced against mine, the world vanished, the years dissolved, the loneliness scattered, and all that remained was the fire of his mouth and the gentleness of his breath. My entire being trembled under the force of it, not from fear, but from the overwhelming recognition that I was alive again. Every sigh, every shiver, every trembling breath was proof that hunger, once awakened, is unstoppable. Desire is not only about the body, it is about the soul remembering that it is worthy of being touched, worthy of being loved, worthy of being seen in its rawest, most vulnerable form. His touch gave me that reminder again and again, until every wall I had built fell away, until there was nothing left but the unfiltered truth of need and love. His touch was fire and tenderness at once. And in that fire, in that tenderness, I was reborn. It wasn't just a body that was held that night. It was a heart that had forgotten how to trust, a soul that had long believed its fire was gone, a life that had settled into silence. His arms wrapped around me with a weight that was more than physical. They carried truth, devotion, and a kind of tenderness that made the years between us dissolve into nothing. In his embrace, time no longer mattered, and age no longer carried weight. What mattered was the way his heartbeat pressed into mine, steady, sure, as if it had been waiting for me all along. Desire had brought us close, yes, but it was what lived beyond desire that truly shook me. When his arms pulled me closer, I felt something I hadn't felt in so many years. Safety. Not the safety of solitude, of walls built high to keep pain away, but the safety of surrender, of being able to let go, to trust that someone else would not let me fall. In that embrace, I was not measured by years or lines or the past. I was measured only by the depth of what we felt in that moment. There was devotion in the way he touched me, not hurried, not careless, but with a reverence that spoke louder than words. Every caress felt like a vow, unspoken yet undeniable. Every kiss carried not just fire but promise, a quiet assurance that this was not fleeting, not shallow, but something rooted deeper. His closeness didn't just ignite me, it steadied me, as though his very presence whispered, that I was not only desired but cherished. The body knows when it is wanted, but the soul knows when it is loved. That night, my soul knew. It trembled not only with passion, but with recognition that what I held in my arms was not simply a lover, but something greater. He wasn't just touching skin. He was reaching into the very core of who I was, into places I thought no one could reach anymore. And when he did, I didn't feel exposed. I felt seen. Time had always been my enemy, a quiet thief that took without mercy. It stole youth, stole moments, stole the certainty of being wanted. But with him, time lost its power. In his arms, there was no past to regret, no future to fear. There was only the present, fierce, tender, eternal in its own way. The years fell away, and what remained was the undeniable truth that love is not bound by clocks or calendars. Love exists beyond them. He held me as though I mattered beyond reason, as though there was nothing else in the world worth holding. The strength of his embrace carried a softness too, a balance that made me ache with both need and peace. I could feel his devotion in the way his breath slowed when mine did, in the way his body curved protectively around mine, in the way his hands never rushed but lingered as if they belonged there. Desire burns hot and wild, but devotion burns steady and true. That night was both. There was heat, yes, the kind that made every inch of my body remember, the kind that left me trembling and breathless, but woven through that fire was something stronger, something that anchored me. His love did not feel like a storm meant to sweep me away. It felt like the ground beneath my feet, solid, certain, carrying me even as I surrendered completely. When his lips moved against mine, it wasn't just passion. It was truth, a truth that told me I was not invisible, not forgotten, not left behind by the years. A truth that reminded me love doesn't fade with time. It deepens, it shifts, it waits for the right moment to bloom again. And when it does, it blooms more fiercely than ever. That night, in his arms, I wasn't simply alive, I was rediscovered. Every sigh that escaped my lips, every tremor in my body, every tear that slipped quietly down my cheek was met with more than desire. It was met with tenderness that told me I was safe to feel, safe to want, safe to love. His arms didn't just hold me, they carried me, lifted me, reminded me of the parts of myself I thought were gone forever. It is a rare thing to be both wanted and loved at once. Many know one without the other, the heat of passion without depth, or the comfort of love without fire. But in his arms, both live together. Fire and truth, desire and devotion, hunger and tenderness. It was everything I thought had slipped through my hands forever, returned to me in the body of one man who made time irrelevant. That night was not only about surrendering to touch, but surrendering to love. Love that doesn't count years, love that doesn't measure worth in youth, love that sees beyond all of it. His arms reminded me that even after silence, even after loneliness, even after I had made peace with emptiness, love can return in full force, not half, not broken, but whole. It wasn't just a body held that night, it was a life rediscovered. If these words touched you, if you felt the fire of love awaken within, then let this space be your sanctuary. Like this video, share it with someone who believes in love's power, and subscribe for more stories that breathe life into the silence. Until we meet again, may your nights never feel empty, may your heart stay open to the spark, and may true love always find its way back to you.